Mr. Simon Wilson is our next presenter. Mr. Wilson is the Acting Financial Secretary in the Ministry of Finance. Mr. Wilson has his career in the Ministry of Finance that has spanned 26 years and has served in various capacities within the Ministry of Finance and on external boards representing the government, including that of the Nassau Airport Development Company, the College of the Bahamas, now University, and the Bahamas International Stock Exchange. He serves as Director of Cable Bahamas Limited. Mr. Wilson also holds an associate's degree in accounting from the College of the Bahamas, a Bachelor of Science degree in economics from the University of the West Indies, Mona, and a Master of Science degree in economics from Florida State University. Mr. Wilson is going to be talking to us about tax reform and management of the government's fiscal resources. Please welcome Mr. Simon Wilson.
Good morning. I guess protocol already been established. It's my pleasure to be here this morning and speak about such a wide topic. And when I saw the topic, I had to smile myself. I thought the topic was going to be, where's the VAT money? But I want to thank Edison for not asking me that question. I think the key thing here is understanding the definitions. Tax reform, which essentially is altering the system of taxation through the introduction of new taxes, the elimination of taxes and fees, and the reduction of or increase in tax rates. So that's what we will consider tax reform. How we alter the system. An alternate system doesn't mean introducing a new tax. It can also mean reducing tax rates or fees. It can mean the elimination of some taxes. And when you talk about managing the fiscal resources, we really focus on how the policies around the collection of taxes and the expenditure of those resources. Those are really the definitions that are really important. And if we look at tax reform, over the last 5 years, the government has been very aggressive in the area of tax reform. My predecessor as Financial Secretary started this process with the launch of the work towards VAT, but we have done other things which are equally, as I put it, traumatic, even though it's not commented about and talked about a lot. For example, we've eliminated hotel guest room tax. That's $30 million, which we've eliminated. So that's one of the answers to where the VAT money going. All right? Business license. We have completely reformed the way business license is done. Much to the chagrin of many businesses, we increased the rates substantially. We changed the definitions. We got rid of special categories of businesses. So essentially we have two categories. Either you're a gas station or you're a business. Same rate structure. That's a big change for a lot of businesses. We also brought in commercial banks into the base at a very high rate of 3% of gross revenue, which is still not the highest tax area. Because if you talk to the guys who do telecommunications, they pay 3% on the communication levy plus business license at the standard rate. So their effective rate is much higher. We have lowered property tax rates considerably. We've waived property tax liabilities for over 5,000 households. And those homes who were under $250,000 who did not pay their property tax up to the 2003 amendment, last year we waived those taxes. We provided the benefits for pensioners. If you're over 65, owner-occupied, you get 50% of property tax. These are significant changes that we've done. We've introduced the environmental levy. At the same time, and the customs processing fee, which is capped at $500 of 1%, but at the same time, we've considerably lowered customs duty rates. And we've eliminated duty on over 300 different lines in the tariff. We've changed the way we calculate customs duty from CIF to FOB. Importers in this room know how important that change is and how much savings they get. That's the next answer to where the VAT money going. These are things that we've talked about in terms of how we rebalance the tax system. We've taken a very aggressive stance in saying, not only looking for yield, but looking for equity. As a result, we've increased tax to GDP from 17% to 22% of GDP. A significant increase, but we are still one of the lowest tax countries in the Caribbean. And against our peers, we are really at the low end of taxes and tax collection. Now, being at the low end of tax collection at 22%, we probably need to be around 26 to 27% to have an overall surplus. And so, how do you get that? The obvious and easiest way is to increase tax rates, tax the persons who are paying more, or find a new method, a new tax. We've taken a different approach. What we've said is, okay, we believe the system is sufficient to achieve that target. We have to be more aggressive in terms of our compliance program. And many persons in the business community, they talk the talk, but when we walk the walk, that's where the challenge is. So, in the compliance program, we have been very aggressive. We had a program called a roadside photographing program for property tax. We've identified 24,000 properties which are not in the property tax register in New Providence. Most of those properties are in high-end areas, West Ridge, off Carmichael Road in the newer subdivisions. These are properties that were built where persons, for whatever reason, have not registered those properties. Some of them have mortgages, some of them don't have mortgages. We have a process and a program now of hand-delivering tax bills. It's inefficient, it's brute force, but we understand the challenges with our postal system, and so we have to make corrections. And eventually we'll be able to launch our public tax portal. We've launched a vigorous program of business license and VAT audits. Many businesses have received letters from a tax authority saying, hey, your tax supply was $10, but you pay business license of only $5. That's because of our improved information systems. We are now able to be more aggressive in identifying those anomalies in the tax structure. They are yielding significant amounts of revenue. Post-clearance audits. We are very aggressive in our post-clearance audits. So what we have done is we have separated and we have created a special revenue task force that sits outside of customs, and they're doing post-clearance audits. It has been very successful. So last week we closed an audit where a taxpayer agreed to pay us $800,000 in taxes, customs duties, underreported. Very, very successful. Last year, we audited 3 courier companies, and collectively they agreed to pay us $7 million in back taxes. We are targeting 35 other courier companies. So very successful. It's created some noise in the community. There's no question about that. It's created some noise. We are going to be even more aggressive. We are bringing in specialist post-clearance audit persons to really tackle the bigger businesses. We've started a process of tackling and auditing developments because really a lot of persons have not been paying their fair share. And so we've taken a very aggressive stance to deal with this. We have strengthened our customs examination process in air cargo and sea cargo. It's done 2 things for us. We've seen an improvement in revenue yields, and we've also been able to capture and identify contraband. I think persons have seen the recent successes identifying bullets and guns and so forth. That's largely because of the efforts we put in strengthening our customs examination process. What they don't see, but what we have seen, is that certain businesses have now reported more by HS code line in imports. So we see the metrics of businesses adjusting to the strengthening compliance. And we feel that this is going to be very, very successful. So on average, in dollars and cents, these efforts have yielded an average of $15 million a month. Our target is $400 million in 2 years in incremental revenue without adjusting rates. We believe that's quite achievable, and if we listen to our advisors and we take a more aggressive stance, their target is almost twice that. And this $15 million is only in the province. We've not stepped out beyond the province yet. So we've not looked at Abaco, we've not looked at Eleuthera, we've not looked at Grand Bahama. And we have not put in the full stream of compliance methods. So let me give you an example. We've identified over 800 businesses who have imported over 30,000 worth of goods. Sorry, let me be correct. We have identified over 800 names. They may be businesses, they may be trade names, who have imported over 30,000 worth of goods last year, who don't have a business license. All right? So we started a pilot project this week on those persons. So they will be getting letters. Last week, we met with the shippers in this country. We've identified a significant amount of shippers who've allowed commercial goods to come without a business license or anything, and without proper identification. Small things, but we're moving on those things because these things bring significant yield. So we're moving very, very aggressive in tax reform. And for us, tax reform, yes, we've done the VAT, right, which people talk a lot about, rightly so. It has been a very successful rollout. And we're working towards improving that. But we've also taken the step of doing other things also. Moving, some would be below the radar, but we're moving very, very aggressively. And I should add, we had the meeting last night about property tax. We are very optimistic what we see in property tax. Some of you have received second notices for the first time. Again, brute force. We have people going to your door and leaving the bill. You know, and it has been, in my mind, one of our success stories. I can tell you as an anecdote, I got a call from my staff. The former FS came into the property tax office because they got a property tax bill, signed and delivered. And I got a next call from a former permanent secretary and former senior official in public and private sector who said, you know, Mr. Wilson, very disrespectful. Senior civil services should not get demand notices for payment. You should have called me and say, here's an amount to be paid. Again, very, 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 very effective. So on the tax side, we are happy. You know, Hurricane Matthew had a dramatic effect on our revenue. And yes, I mean, you see, besides the seasonalities, we lost about $100 million because of Hurricane Matthew in revenue, $120 million. We accept that. But we also see in January, December, January and February, we launched an initiative in late November. We see the marked improvement and we see the momentum being built. You know, and we have all the metrics which will show that we are heading in the right directions on the tax side. It's a very aggressive, hands-on program. That's one side of the ledger. Other side of the ledger is how you manage these resources. So, again, let's see what the challenges are. We don't have an integrated financial management system. The government, you know, we have about 15 different ways to pay somebody. You know, when we hire or onboard an employee, we issue 8 original copies of the letter, which have to be signed. For an employee to move from payroll to pension, usually is a 3-month gap at the minimum, and for most employees, it's around 6 months. Collection of revenue, traditionally, most of the government's revenue was collected by cash, which is a major challenge. It's very expensive, it's hard to manage, and so forth. Our procurement rules. Our procurement rules talk about least price. It doesn't talk about the best option. And so sometimes, because we are constrained to get the cheapest price, we're not getting the best option. And we see a lot in construction, we see a lot in technology, where if we follow the rules explicitly, we won't get it, the best option. And then the government doesn't use its buying power. Traditionally, the government, each agency manages their own spending patterns. So we had, for example, over 100 different cellular packages. All at BTC, all different. You know, we purchase water from the regular vendors, but each vendor had a different price arrangement with a different department. We purchase something homogeneous like paper. And everybody buying paper in our own building, for example, we share that building with the office of the Prime Minister. We had 2 different paper vendors. Same 8.5 by 11, 20-pound paper, but 2 different vendors. Sometimes the same type of paper, but 2 different prices. What happened was that the processes, the business processes of government have not been changed. So we're addressing this. We have a loan agreement with IDB to implement an integrated financial management system. That's not a small task. That's not a next week task. That's a task that's going to take us a better part of 5 years, or even longer. If we get it right, we'll see a real reduction in costs. If we get it wrong, we may go months without paying people. And the accountants here know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a big, big job. It's a big job which require the government to use all the resources, all the account resources which are in this island to get it done. It is a big job. We modernize our business and our payment processes. So one of the things that we have done is that we've said, okay, let's get this business issuing checks. Issuing checks for payment, inefficient, brutal, time-consuming, all the bad things. You don't do your reconciliations, all those bad things. So we've moved towards direct deposits very, very aggressively. That's also improved our revenue. Because we now tell businesses, I have the deposit in your account. You can't cash it and hide it. And you'll be surprised how many businesses do that. You can't come to me and change the name from your business to your personal name, because you want underdeclare your business license. So right now, most people don't realize it, but most of our significant revenue streams are not collected by cash. So for example, you can't walk in any government agency and pay VAT over the counter or business license. Property tax is moving to that place rapidly. We launched our portal early January, and in January we did $10 million worth of credit card transaction on our property tax portal. which is, according to folks at Royal Bank, a lot. They were surprised. Departure taxes. All those things are direct deposits. We are moving towards doing the customs duty also. And soon, hopefully before the end of this fiscal year, we will see 90% of our taxes and fees collected through online portals. We want to remove the cashier from our equation. Different is different, but it's a change that's necessary. We have an e-tendering system that we soon to launch. This is part of the infamous project. We are modernizing our rules on procurement. So we have draft regulations on procurement. We had them drafted but with 5 years, which would take the great leap forward. But what we realize is that if you put those rules in, we have to do a better job incentivizing the business community. One of the things that we realized when we moved towards central using the government's buying power, that businesses are also equally as inefficient and have for years, because of the government's inefficiency, not made the type of investments required to keep up with a modern operation. So I get businesses that come, goods and service businesses, who have standing accounts receivable from the government that go back 5 and 7 years. All the time. They show up. They're just doing their work and they just realize the government owe them money and so forth. Usually they do this when I say, hey, you owe me business license fees or you need a tax compliance certificate. That's when they show up and say, you owe me money and so forth. And we have no record of ever receiving the goods. And in most cases, we don't receive the goods. We issue the purchase order, the usual trick at the end of the year. We issue the purchase order at the end of the fiscal year because we don't want to lose the money, with the promise the goods will be delivered with a certain business. The goods may or may not be delivered. There's no pressing for payment because it's a known government trick. And now when we press hard for compliance, they show up and say, hey, you owe me $10,000 and it's a 15-year or 8-year bill or so forth. We've taken a stance that we settle those bills and then we don't do business with you anymore. That's the stance I've told my staff. We settle those bills and then I take you off my vendor list. And most people, when they hear that, they say, no, don't worry about that. Let's move on. But we've been aggressive on the expenditure side equally. So, and we have, I will say, some very significant wins. We reduced the cost of acquisition of vehicles by having a frank discussion with the two largest car importers in the country and car salesmen and say, you have to treat the government differently. We are your largest customer. We should be treated differently. And they agreed. And we lowered the cost of acquisition of vehicles. We were able to modernize our fleet. So when people say, oh, we see a lot of red plates in the road, those people didn't realize how much cars were parked in the back of the Ministry of Works yard, not working, and how much departments were not operating efficiently. We took a handle on our fuel costs. And you may say, well, that's small. No. If you talk to the fuel vendors, they'll say the government was a notorious bad payer because we couldn't keep track of what we were using. Instead, we took that by the bull by the horn. We worked with the vendors and said, hey, let's change our approach. On communication costs, we had a close relationship with our vendors, with our vendor, at the time, BTC. You bill us, we may pay, or we take it from dividends. And what we did is we went through a whole exercise, we started auditing our services, and then we discover, well, you're billing me for things that I haven't used in 20, 30 years. It was an eye-opening exercise for both of us. But we got significant gains from that and savings. We looked at our cellular bill and we said, well, why are we paying $1 million a month for cellular services? Because we have all these different contracts. We consolidated, we got savings from that. So we have, on the expenditure side, we have been equally as aggressive. We don't talk a lot about it, but the vendors who interact with us understand the things that we have done to lower costs and drive efficiencies. So overall, we believe that with our efforts on tax reform, our margin of fiscal resources, we believe that a fiscal balance, and that's subject to any external shocks, negative external shocks, is quite achievable in the next 4 years. We are working very hard towards it. Now, external shocks are important because, and you may say, well, that's a cop-out, here they copping out. But the reality is, we are in a hurricane zone. Matthew passed through New Providence. We were without power in New Providence for instance, 4 days. Mr. Butler talked about 19 days. That had an impact on our revenue. We quantify it as over $100 million impact on our revenue. And you may say, why $100 million in October? Well, October is our quarterly VAT month. We didn't get almost zero value to Grand Bahama in October. That's a process of us trying to recover that now. And even now, you have to be humane and try how you recover it. You can't come with a big stick approach, which is my preference, but the reality is you can't come with that approach. On the expenditure side, and you might say, but why is your hurricane expenditure so high? Mr. Butler talked about the estimate of $600 million, but in Grand Bahama, we have to rebuild 92 homes. 92 homes we have to rebuild in Grand Bahama. All right? In Andros, we have over 50 homes to rebuild in Andros. And you say, well, why is the government rebuilding those homes? But when you see those people and the conditions they live in, and you will encourage them to do the right thing and move them away from the vulnerable areas in the coast, there's some responsibility the government has to take. That's a small part of it. We have to repair the schools. These are things which are unavoidable with a storm. So, if you put natural disasters aside, we are very comfortable. There may be an external shock, and the targets might be missed. But there's something else I want to mention. The debt to GDP is a very important ratio. But I think in the Bahamian context, many persons get confused with debt and deficits. The deficit is going down. Mr. Butler talked about the primary balance, the negative primary balance, which is shifting towards positive. Our fiscal position is improving. Yes, we have missed our deficit targets because of known events, but there's no question that we are doing a job in controlling expenditure and improving the revenue base. There's no question about that. But too often, I think the commentators get confused and they ask the question, rightly, well, why is debt increasing? But the debt, if you look at all of our projections, and our projections go over a 5-year period, we started this process about 4 years ago and given 5-year rolling projections on where we are going. It was clear, and we said the debt will increase until we get the deficit down. And yes, you might say in the business community, I could fire 1,000 persons and so forth. But the reality is, unfortunately for the Bahamas, we have underinvested considerably in our public service. we can't keep pace with the demands of the public. But at the same time, we are trying to control our expenditure, but the public is demanding more and more services. It would be far cheaper for us, for example, not to invest in a new customs system. But you talk to any importer, they'll tell you, if you go back to the days of stand up in the long room to submit an entry, they'll go crazy. Those systems cost money, and the marginal cost takes a while to be amortized. So I think commentators are better than mine. And I think the last point is that GDP. We're the only country in the Caribbean with 3 years of negative growth. Official. 3 years. Notwithstanding the fact that we've overshot our VAT targets, and these weren't targets that we suppress. These were targets that were derived by models done by the IMF, IDB and ourselves, triangulated models. Notwithstanding the fact that we have seen positive employment growth, very positive employment growth, our official statistics report 3 years of negative growth. The challenge in collecting statistics in an environment like the Bahamas, low direct taxes, where we rely on surveys from businesses who, for whatever reason, believe that somehow this information going into the tax authority explains some of it. And that can't be discounted. And there's also the challenge of us being archipelago. When you go into the Exumas or you go into the Berry Islands and you see the level of developments there, you ask yourself, are they being captured in the national accounts? We have seen, with our revenue project, we have seen a significant amount of businesses that for years underreport their revenue. Suppressing the country's consumption level and suppressing the country's GDP. So let's bear in mind, we'll be saying the GDP statistics are wrong. People have to bear in mind the mitigating factors before they say, you know what, yeah, their GDP ratio is too high. And when you see the other metrics, then you understand that maybe there's some things that aren't being captured. And you might say, well, you're talking smoke, but I'll leave you with this. Last year, first year of VAT, we use our little power in the VAT Act, and we ask a liquor distributor, give me a list of your clients over the year who purchased from you. On top of the list was a little bar in Baintown. They purchased around $5.6 million a year from one liquor distributor, around $3.4 from the next liquor distributor. They purchase $8 million a year in liquor. That's excluding when they purchase off the street. And those in the business know I made, they also do some street purchases too. Their business license they reported, $50,000. $50,000. A small liquor store in Baintown. We neglect the fact that we realized that the owner was driving a $200,000 Mercedes, but a small liquor store. And I knew we were correct when his pastor came and said to my tax people, you'll see him in church. He's be right in the back there on the corner, and he's a good parishioner. He always gives us what we want. You have to be easy on him. He made a little mistake. Thank you very much.
So if you have any questions for Simon, we're going to take those now, and then we're going to take a very, very brief recess so that we can get ourselves set for Yako's presentation that follows. So Simon, please, if you have a question, just stand, identify yourself, because we are taking notes. and raise your question.
Good morning, Mr. Wilson. It's not a family audience. Just a quick question regarding the getting to a surplus. You mentioned a 4-year time frame, which would be 2020. The rating agencies, what target do they want to see?
Well, the agencies use a number of different metrics to determine the rating. A lot of those metrics are external. It's a pair comparison. They would like to see, in the case of the rating agencies, S&P, clearly they're concerned with the level of debt. And they're also concerned about the growth levels. Because their view, rightly, is that you have to grow yourself out of this. You know, you got it impacted, you have to grow yourself out of this. So they're concerned about growth levels primarily, and we believe with Bahamas coming on stream, with improvements in the way we capture economic activity, that we will show strong growth before 2018, 2019. You know.
But I reserve that for perhaps a private conversation. But what I would really wish to get some clarity on is how is it that we have an expectation of reasonable economic growth in an environment where the real sector is being taxed significantly by way of VAT, right? And at the same time, the government is reducing deficit. Where do you expect the growth to come from in an environment like that?
So I think the key thing is, remember now, what we've done is we've rebalanced the tax system. So for many businesses, their overall tax burden has dropped considerably. There are some businesses who, because of the way the tax system was set, were not being taxed equally. And so we've shifted and we've rebalanced the system. So for example, if we were to say not broaden the tax base and not include commercial banks into the domestic business license, that's $36 million I got to find from someplace. I have to find from ordinary businesses. By moving for importers, if you're in the import business and you dry goods and selling dry goods, we move from CIF to FOB. That's a significant savings. If you are in the car business, for example, and you were selling cars over Japan, some people saw a savings of over $2,000 or $3,000 a vehicle. That's the taxes that the government foregone, right? So we have shifted and rebalanced the taxes. We have taxed new sectors, and we are continually reducing the tax rate. This year, for example, commercial businesses, commercial property tax rates went down. So I think, in fairness to what we're doing, it's a broad base. We're not trying to overburden one sector, even though I believe there are some sectors that are seriously undertaxed, you know, and we're doing that, and we also target new sectors. So that's what the growth, we think the growth is going to be a very even growth.
I guess perhaps I was not sufficiently clear. I'm not arguing against or for the government's fiscal policy. I'm just trying to get a sense of the math of it all. My point is that if the government extracts, if the government.
So sorry, don't cut you off, Linda, but let me be clear. I'm an economist.
Right.
I look at the metrics.
Mm-hmm.
I think our growth numbers don't reflect the true level of growth.
So,
Okay? I can look at my business license numbers and report turnover for some businesses. For my large businesses, they're growing at sometimes 3 to 4 times the nominal rate of growth. That's what so I see the real data. I can look at my large businesses and I see what their sales levels are, reported sales levels are. They're growing, in some cases, double digits. So I know there's significant growth in the economy which is not captured on the consumption side, all right?
Yeah.
One of the challenges we had, to be clear, was that last year was our first full year of VAT data. That data was not integrated in our national accounts data. Once it's integrated, we might have a different picture. But we know that we know there's significant economic activity and growth, which just hasn't been fully reflected.
Yeah. Simon, I guess, well, there's one thing to say that the GDP is larger than perhaps we anticipated, right? But that's a totally different position from saying that that there is more growth than we anticipated. But the point, I guess the point that I'm seeking to make is how, if you were to extract $600 million or a net of, say, $500 million from the real economy, and you are reducing your deficit substantially, the government being a significant part of the economy, right? If the government is reducing its expenditure, if the real economy is being taxed, how do we reasonably expect growth in that environment?
No, but
Yeah.
but I think you're missing the compliance efforts that we're taking. What we are saying from our side is straightforward. The economy is bigger than what it is. There are businesses who are not paying their fair share. Let me go back to the couriers. So let me tell you what the couriers is doing. You walk in the courier, you pay VAT and duty. Your expectation is that money goes into the treasury. True? Let me tell you what's happening. That money is going into cars. Lifestyle. They wasn't remitting the money into the treasury. They were stealing the money, to be frank. They were stealing the money. So these are the things that what we've seen in our efforts in revenue compliance is that the activity is there. Because of the inefficiencies in the system, we were not capturing activities properly. We are now taking steps to capture activities. So this is a clear message we've said to everybody. We are making full effort to collect what is due to the government. At the same time, we are working very aggressively to lower tax rates. So that's how legitimate businesses are being encouraged, by lowering tax rates. So, and I think we've demonstrated that. If you look at the tax rates, look at our yield, rates are going down, the yield is going up.
Good morning. I'm Disa Campbell. And my question is, well, first of all, I'd like to commend you for your vigorous efforts in tax reform and collection. But at the same time, there seems to be very little regard for the impact of the policies on the private sector. And it's becoming more and more difficult to get things out of the various bodies. For instance, it takes 2 weeks sometimes to get a tax compliance certificate that is good for 4 weeks. A business license, which we must have in hand in order to collect revenues, import supplies, secure contracts. It expires on the 31st. You want audited financial statements. It takes much longer than 31 days to get a set of audited financial statements. So I just want to know what consideration is being given to firm up your practices, but at the same time make it easier for the private sector, which really drives your revenue.
So, business license expire on March 31st. Okay?
January
No,
31st.
No. See, if you read the act and see, this is one of the challenges we have. People don't fully understand how it operates. There's a reason why we say you must pay by March 31st. Because that's when it expires, by March 31st. The government made long ago, I wouldn't do it if I was the government, but they made the decision that the business license year should end March 31st. So that even though the license expires December 31st, there's a 3-month grace period. So let me tell you what we have done from our side. In the past, in the old business license system, there was no income verification. You put whatever you want to put. Whatever you want to put, and we were happy to get the money. And so, there are some people who are very honest. They put exactly what the right thing is, but most people aren't honest. Most people put whatever they want to put. So what we did is we said, okay, the staff, we have to get income verification. Income verification for us has proven to be very successful. With income verification, you will be facing an environment of increasing tax rates. On the TCC, the TCC process is a process where, yes, there's a challenge. And I'll be the first to admit there's a challenge. That challenge is because we are doing agency duty for national insurance. Because for us, it's like that. But for national insurance, because by law, we have to do agency duty for national insurance, there's a challenge. National insurance response rate sometimes is not as quick as we would like. The other part of the challenge is that many businesses have arrears. They have national insurance arrears, they have business license arrears, they have property tax arrears. And they expect to do business with the government. The TCC is only required when you do business with the government. And to me, it seems sensible that if you want to do business with me as the government, that you owe me no money. If you don't want to do business with the government, you don't need a TCC. But if you want to do business with the government, you need a TCC, and you really should come with clean hands. Now, we have changed our process slightly because we realized that for some businesses is a problem. The process is a problem. So the process is now online, and we allow businesses to pre-order their TCCs on a monthly basis. All online, all electronic. You can come in and you can say, I want TCCs for the next 6 months, and it's pre-done. And if you are tax compliant, it's not a problem. If you are not tax compliant, I take a very strong stance on that. And my view is, I can't by law, I can't by policy do business with a business which has no intention of becoming tax compliant. And there are some businesses who have no intention of becoming tax compliant. Their preference is to call a politician and complain. But I'm not a politician. You know, I work for politicians, but not a politician. My job is to make sure the law is enforced. And those businesses, rightly, they have a long time to get TCC.
Good morning. Tanya McCartney, BFSB. You indicated that the current tax rate is somewhere between 17 to 22%. Yet from where I sit, the outside world sees us as a no-tax jurisdiction, which leads to adverse listings. In addition to that, we are unable to enter into double taxation agreements or bilateral investment agreements or in the current tax structure. What are your views, or what tax reforms do you envisage to better position the financial services sector?
So the tax to GDP is around 22% now. That's not the rate. That's just, if you take all the government's taxes and fees, put over GDP, you get around 22%. You know, my view, and this is only my view, like Jerry, I could say this is not the Ministry of Finance view, but my view is that over a period of time, we have the lower business license fees. The business license fees poses a problem for a lot of reasons, right? It doesn't capture the profitability of the business properly, and that's a challenge. So that has to be lowered. Now the question, I guess, the financial service sector will say is that why don't you have a corporate tax? That in itself poses a different challenge for us in terms of do we have the administrative capacity to implement a corporate tax. The beauty of business licenses, it's a pretty simple tax to administer. Total revenue times the percentage. For corporate tax, there's a transition required to have that administrative framework in place. So I would like to see business license lowered, property tax lowered, and property tax base expanded, and eventually consideration may be given to some type of corporate income tax. But that's a very delicate subject for two reasons. The primary reason is that the government's administration, tax administration, it's pretty weak. even though we have done some reforms over the last 5 to 7 years, it's an underinvested sector of the public sector. We don't have the skill sets required because we don't pay the salaries required to attract the skills that we need, but we don't have the skill sets required. That's a long-term discussion. How do you do the complete reform of the tax system? But overall, I'm one for lowering rates and broadening the base, and eventually, maybe a corporate tax may be the way to go, but that's medium-term and long-term goal. Thank you so much. I do apologize. I have to leave. I'm late.